I'd waited my whole life for that envelope. My grandma made it clear, when I turned 18, I'd receive something she'd saved just for me. It was supposed to mark my future, her final gift. But when I opened it, there was nothing inside, just a blank piece of paper, and my aunt's cold stare. She looked at me and said, "Your grandma spent it all before she died." But that wasn't true. I knew it. And I was going to prove it, no matter what it cost. If you've ever been lied to by someone you trusted, or had something stolen that meant the world to you, this story will strike deep. Stick around, hit like if it resonates, and let me know in the comments. What would you have done? I grew up in a quiet, one-story house with creaky wooden floors and the smell of cinnamon always hanging in the air. My grandma, Ruth, raised me after my mom passed away in a car accident when I was just 6. I don't remember much about my mom, just her laugh, soft like a lullaby. But I remember everything about my grandma. Grandma Ruth was the kind of woman people turned to. Not flashy, not loud, just steady. She had strong hands from years of gardening and baking, and a gaze that saw right through lies. She never spoke much about money, but I knew she was careful with every dollar. And I also knew, even as a kid, that she was saving something important, for me. She kept a small blue box in her dresser. I wasn't supposed to know about it, but I'd seen her put envelopes in there over the years. Once, when I was 12, I asked her why she always wrote my name on those envelopes. She smiled and said, "Because one day, when you're ready, those will help you go wherever you want in life." That became our quiet promise. We didn't have much, but Grandma always made me feel rich, not in the way of money, but in love and in certainty. She never broke a promise, never. When I was 16, she got sick, lung cancer. She fought it with the kind of quiet grace only someone like her could carry. She never made a fuss, but the house got quieter. The baking stopped. The garden went dry. And one afternoon, as we sat on the porch wrapped in quilts, she held my hand and said, "When you turn 18, Haley, there'll be something waiting. Paula knows. She promised me she'd give it to you." That was the first and only time my grandma ever mentioned my aunt in a good light. Paula, my mom's younger sister, was nothing like Grandma Ruth. She was difficult, aloof. She showed up at Thanksgiving sometimes, usually late, usually half drunk, with complaints about her job, her exes, or how unfair life had been to her. She wore too much perfume and smiled only when it benefited her. Still, I knew she was family, and Grandma trusted her with something important. When Grandma passed, I was 17 and shattered. She died in her sleep, holding my baby photo in one hand and a rosary in the other. We buried her on a rainy morning, and Paula didn't even cry. At the wake, she patted my shoulder and said, "You'll be okay, you're strong." Then she poured herself a glass of red wine and didn't say another word to me the rest of the day. I moved in with a family friend temporarily. I worked part-time after school and tried to hold it together. But in the back of my mind, I clung to that one thing. My 18th birthday. Grandma's promise. The envelopes. The blue box. Something was coming. I just had to wait. A week before my birthday, Paula called me. That was already strange. We weren't close, and she barely acknowledged me at family events. She said she wanted to grab coffee and catch up. Her voice was overly sweet, like a spoonful of sugar hiding something bitter. We met at a small cafe near downtown. I sat at the corner booth, nervous and excited. She showed up in oversized sunglasses, a silk scarf, and a fake smile. "I can't believe you're turning 18, she said, sipping her latte like she hadn't forgotten my last 2 birthdays. "Your grandma would have been so proud." I nodded. "She mentioned you had something for me. She said you'd give it to me when I turned 18. Paula blinked, then rummaged in her purse. "Oh, right. Of course." She handed me a plain white envelope. It had my name scribbled on it in black ink, not Grandma's handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Blank. I looked up. Is this a mistake? Paula didn't flinch. She took another sip of her drink and said flatly, "There's nothing, Haley. Your grandma, she ended up needing that money, medical bills, groceries, life." I sat there frozen. "That's not true," I whispered. She looked at me, voice harder now. "She told me to tell you if you asked. Things change, Haley. People die, money gets used. You're an adult now. Time to understand how the world works." I left the cafe in a haze. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked, the envelope crumpled in my hand, my heart pounding with something hot and sharp. Because I knew my grandma, and she never, ever broke a promise. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling fan as it whirred softly above me, the blank sheet of paper resting on the nightstand like a cruel joke. I turned the words over and over in my mind. Things change. People die. Money gets used. But the only thing I kept hearing was my grandma's voice. "Your Aunt Paula will give it to you." She'd said it with such clarity, even near the end, when everything else was starting to fade. I wanted to believe it had all just gotten lost. That maybe Grandma had intended to give me something, but Paula had forgotten. Maybe there'd been confusion, or some technical error, or anything but this deliberate lie. Because if it was a lie, then it meant someone I had trusted, someone Grandma had trusted, had betrayed her. And me. By the next morning, my grief had taken on a new shape. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was something tighter, sharper, quiet fury. I went to the drawer where I kept all of Grandma's letters. She used to write me little notes on yellow stationery with a purple pen. Encouragements, grocery lists, prayers. I read through them one by one, hunting for a sign, for some confirmation that I wasn't losing my mind. And there it was. A folded note, dated 2 years before she passed. "Dearest Haley, no matter what happens to me, always remember, the gift is for you. It is safe, and Paula knows where it is. Ask her when the time comes. She promised me she'd deliver it. Love, Grandma." I sat frozen. My fingers trembled. This wasn't just a vague memory. It was written proof that something had been promised, and now it was gone. That's when something shifted inside me. It was like the moment you realize the water isn't getting warmer, it's boiling, and you're already in it. I remembered a conversation I had with Mr. Dillard, my senior year civics teacher. He taught us about power of attorney, wills, estate transfers. I remembered him saying once, "The thing about money is, it leaves a trail, even when people try to bury it." So I did something I never thought I would. I skipped school the next day and went to the bank. I walked into the branch where Grandma always went. Everyone knew her there. The old teller with the red glasses, Ms. Judy, even smiled at me as I stepped up. "You're Ruth's granddaughter, right? Haley?" I nodded. My voice felt dry. "Yes, I just turned 18, and I was wondering if I could look into a transaction. It's about something my grandma told me she left for me." Ms. Judy hesitated. "Do you have any paperwork?" I pulled out my ID and the note Grandma had written me. It wasn't a legal document, but it was something. She read it slowly, then looked at me with a mix of sympathy and hesitation. "Hang on, I'll see what I can do." 15 minutes passed. I sat in one of those stiff waiting chairs, watching a potted fern sway from the AC draft. When Judy returned, she was holding a printed sheet. "I can't give you full access to your grandmother's account. You weren't listed as a beneficiary, but I can confirm one thing. There was a final transfer made 2 weeks before she passed." She handed me the paper. My eyes scanned it desperately. A transfer of $2,400. Recipient, Paula Sinclair. There it was, plain as day. The exact amount Grandma used to joke about when she said, "It's not much, but it'll get you through your first year of college without ramen noodles." I thanked Ms. Judy and walked out of the bank with the paper clutched in my hand like a torch. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was truth. Paula lied. She took the money, and she looked me dead in the face and told me it never existed. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. That afternoon, I called Mr. Dillard. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe just someone to confirm I wasn't crazy. Maybe someone to tell me what to do. He listened quietly as I explained. Then he said something I'll never forget. "Haley, what she did, if you can prove it, is not just immoral. It's criminal, especially if your grandmother's intent can be shown in writing. That note is stronger than you think." He asked if I could meet him at the school library after hours. He offered to help me organize what I had and start a file. I was stunned. "You'd do that for me?" He chuckled. "You're not the first student who's had to grow up fast, but you might be the first one to turn grief into justice this quickly." I hung up with tears in my eyes. Not from sadness, from relief. I wasn't alone. And now, I had a path. That weekend, I met Mr. Dillard in the back corner of the school library. He brought a yellow legal pad, a manila folder, and a small stack of law textbooks that looked older than both of us combined. We sat at a table by the window, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the worn wood. He looked at me with the calm seriousness of someone who had seen too much injustice to be surprised by any of it. "First," he said, "we document everything. Every note, every transaction, every conversation you remember. No detail is too small." So I told him everything, from the envelopes in Grandma's dresser to the day she gave Paula the responsibility. I handed him the copy of the bank transfer. He nodded slowly as he read. "This shows intent," he said, tapping the handwritten note from Grandma. "And this," he added, holding the bank record, "shows action. Now we build the bridge between them." Over the next few days, I became obsessed. Between school, work, and sleep, when I could sleep, I was gathering evidence. I contacted the hospice nurse who visited Grandma in her final weeks. She remembered Paula stopping by a few times, always asking questions about Grandma's finances, always nosy about what was left. Then I searched through Grandma's old notebooks. She kept one by her chair to jot things down. Inside, I found a dated note in her handwriting. "Confirmed with Paula. She'll give Haley the college money on her 18th. Final transfer scheduled." It was like every scrap of paper became a puzzle piece, each one snapping into place with sickening clarity. I also began to catalog every inconsistency Paula had ever shared. During that birthday coffee, she claimed Grandma used the money up before she died. But the transfer happened after her final hospital visit. I even found a voicemail from Paula, sent a week before Grandma passed, where she said, "If anything happens, I'll make sure Haley gets what's hers." I downloaded it, backed it up twice, and added it to the growing case file I now kept hidden under my bed. Mr. Dillard reviewed everything. "You're building a compelling case," he said. "But I need to be honest. This isn't going to be quick or easy. She's family, and family knows how to make things messy." I nodded. "I'm not doing this for revenge, sir. I'm doing this for Grandma. She trusted the wrong person, and that person thinks I'm too young, too weak, too stupid to fight back." He smiled. Not kindly, but with a quiet fire. "Then let's make sure she regrets that." I started researching small claims court, probate law, and inheritance disputes. I learned how hard it was to win when there was no official will, just a handwritten note and a bunch of heartache. But I also learned that courts consider intent, and that witnesses matter. I called my old neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, who had tea with Grandma every Friday. She remembered Grandma saying, "I'm putting aside what little I have for Haley's future. Paula's just the messenger." She agreed to write a statement. Every day, the file grew. Every night, I grew stronger. But I didn't want to go to court first. I wanted the truth to hurt before the legal system even touched her. I wanted Paula to feel the walls close in. I wanted her to know that lying to a grieving teenager wasn't going to stay quiet. So I began outlining another plan, one that didn't require a judge, just a little courage and the right timing. Mr. Dillard raised an eyebrow when I told him. "You're going public?" he asked. "Not with anger," I said. "With truth. People don't like it when someone steals from a dead woman, especially when that woman was as loved as my grandma." He leaned back in his chair. "Then tell it carefully. Make sure everything you share can be backed up. Don't give her an inch to twist it around." I nodded. "I won't." It was time to make Paula feel exactly what she made me feel on my birthday. Alone, exposed, and without a defense. The first video I posted was simple. It was just me sitting in front of my grandma's favorite quilt, holding the blank sheet of paper Paula gave me. No makeup, no music, just my voice, steady but raw. I titled it, "On my 18th birthday, my aunt gave me nothing, but here's what my grandma left behind." I explained the timeline, from my childhood with grandma to the envelope with nothing inside. I held up her handwritten note, then the bank transfer, then the voicemail. "I'm not doing this to go viral," I said. "I'm doing this because my grandma trusted someone she shouldn't have. And now I'm the one left picking up the pieces. If this has ever happened to you, I want you to know you're not alone." I hit upload, and then I waited. By morning, it had 4,000 views. By nightfall, 32,000. Within 2 days, over 100,000. Comments poured in. "This is heartbreaking. I hope you get justice. Your grandma sounds like an angel. She deserved better. File a lawsuit. Do not let her get away with this." People started tagging legal advice creators, estate lawyers, even local news stations. My inbox filled with strangers offering support, tips, and screenshots of others who had gone through similar betrayals. And then, Paula found it. I got the first call on a Thursday afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was tight, teetering between fake concern and simmering rage. "Haley, what the hell are you doing? You need to take that video down, now. You're ruining my reputation, and none of what you're saying is true." Then a second voicemail. "I'm warning you. Defamation is serious. I could sue you for this." I didn't respond. I didn't have to, because by then, someone had found Paula's Facebook. Her comment section exploded. People were posting links to the video, asking questions, demanding answers. She shut her page down within 48 hours. Then, it got worse, for her. One of Grandma's old friends, a retired nurse named Margaret, reached out to me privately. She said Paula once bragged about the inheritance money at a wine night. That she joked, "It's not like the kid will ever know the difference." Margaret agreed to send a sworn statement. I added it to the folder, and then came the message from a local podcast called Small Town Shadows. They wanted to interview me, not as a scandal, but as a cautionary tale about trust and legacy. I hesitated, but I said yes. The episode dropped a week later. The host treated my story with empathy and precision. And Paula? Well, her name was never mentioned. Legally, I was careful, but anyone who knew us knew who the aunt was. That week, Paula showed up at my door. She was red-faced, wearing oversized sunglasses, trying to look composed, but her hands were shaking. "You need to stop this, Haley," she said. "This has gone too far." I stood in the doorway, calm. "You stole from Grandma," I said. "And then you lied to me. I'm just telling the truth." "You don't understand how things were," she snapped. "She asked me to handle it. I needed the money for expenses." "She didn't say to take it for your expenses," I cut in. "She said to give it to me, and she wrote it down." Paula's mouth tightened. You think people are going to stay on your side forever? You think sympathy lasts? No, I said. But facts do. I shut the door. 2 days later, a lawyer, pro bono, contacted me through the podcast team. He offered to help me draft a formal demand letter, backed by all the evidence I had collected. We sent it to Paula by certified mail. The clock started ticking. She had 30 days to return the money or face a civil suit. And for the first time, I felt like the 18-year-old girl who got a blank envelope had become someone powerful, someone her aunt could no longer ignore, someone her grandma would have been proud of. Watching Paula squirm under the weight of her own lies, it felt like justice was finally catching up. If you've ever had to fight for what was rightfully yours, share your story in the comments and make sure you're subscribed. Because sometimes, telling the truth is the most powerful revenge. Lena knew she couldn't expose Paula with just suspicion and fury. She needed irrefutable evidence and the perfect moment. The justice she wanted wasn't just personal. It had to be public, undeniable, and permanent. She started with quiet groundwork. First, she reached out to her cousin Maggie, Paula's stepdaughter from her first marriage, a woman who had been cast aside years ago and bore her own scars from Paula's manipulation. At first, Maggie was hesitant. I don't want to be dragged into family mess again, she warned. But when Lena told her what was at stake, the house, the inheritance, her mother's legacy, Maggie's tone shifted. If you're serious, I might have something for you. Maggie emailed Lena an old flash drive, legal documents, bank statements, even a voice memo of Paula bragging about how idiots sign anything if you smile enough. It wasn't the smoking gun yet, but it was a trail, and it led Lena straight to the attorney's office Paula had used to transfer the deed. Lena didn't go in blind. She posed as someone asking about estate planning and used a hidden recorder tucked neatly in her purse. After a few probing questions, the assistant revealed something shocking. The notary listed on her mother's house transfer hadn't worked there in years. That's odd, the assistant muttered. I remember him. He moved to Florida in 2020. The document was signed in 2022. That was it. Forgery. But even that wasn't enough for Lena. She needed witnesses, not just paper trails. So she dug deeper. Paula's neighbor, Mrs. Riggs, an elderly woman who still tended her rosebushes every morning, remembered seeing Lena's mom leave the house crying just a week before her death. She looked scared, the woman said, her voice soft. She never told me why. Lena's rage boiled, but she kept her focus. The final piece came from Lena's late mother's phone, which Lena had kept sealed in a drawer since the funeral. One night, unable to sleep, she charged it. There were voicemails, some too painful to listen to, but one stood out. Dated just 5 days before her death, it was her mother's voice, hoarse and desperate. I don't trust Paula anymore, it said. She's pushing me to sign things I don't understand. I want you to know, if something happens, please make it right. Lena clutched the phone like it was her mother's hand. That voicemail wasn't just a cry for help. It was permission, a final blessing, a plea for justice. She backed everything up, photos, files, audio, and called Maggie again. I'm going to confront her, not in private. I want her exposed. Maggie didn't hesitate. When and where? That's when Lena remembered the annual family gathering Paula still insisted on hosting, claiming it was in honor of her late husband. It was coming up next weekend. Everyone would be there, including the family attorney, including the notary Paula supposedly used. Perfect. Lena started making calls. Quietly, carefully. She invited one more guest, a friend of hers who was now an investigative journalist. Just bring a camera. You don't have to do anything. Just document. The stage was set. All Paula knew was that Lena had finally agreed to attend. Paula smiled when she saw the RSVP. She thought the storm had passed. But Lena? She was the storm. The town hall auditorium was packed to the brim with friends, neighbors, local officials, and reporters. What was meant to be a simple community Q&A with the planning board had turned into a highly anticipated event, fueled by whispers of corruption, favoritism, and stolen land. Paula stood at the front, trying to maintain her polished composure in a pastel blazer and a pearl necklace that now looked more like armor than adornment. She greeted the room with a too bright smile, but her eyes darted, scanning for Julia. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. From the back of the room, Julia rose slowly, file folder in hand. She wore black, not for mourning, but for clarity. Her presence was silent thunder. As she stepped to the public microphone, the room quieted. Not a rustle, not a cough. Her voice was steady. For months I've stayed silent, hoping the truth would come out on its own. But silence only helped the lies grow, so let's begin. She opened the folder. First, she displayed aerial maps of the property lines, the original documents showing the entire stretch of land that had once belonged to her parents. Then, the altered versions Paula had filed 2 years ago, with the boundaries redrawn to exclude the section that had been promised to Julia. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Julia didn't stop. She handed copies to the planning board members, already wide-eyed, and moved on to the notarized letter her mother had written before her passing, stating clearly that the back parcel of land was meant to go to Julia, as agreed within the family. Then came the emails, uncovered with the help of an old tech-savvy classmate, where Paula corresponded with a developer, bragging about how the old bat never put it in writing, and how Julia's too soft to fight back anyway. The room, once still, now buzzed with disbelief. Paula's mouth opened, but no words came. Her hands trembled slightly, her fingers clenching the arms of her chair. The mayor, seated behind the board, shifted uncomfortably and whispered to his aide. And then, the final blow. Julia projected the bank transfer records, one showing a wire to a private account in Paula's name from the developer, suspiciously timed 2 days after the land paperwork had been updated. "I don't want her money," Julia said, her voice raw now. "I don't want revenge. I want the truth. And I want what was stolen from my family to be made right." Paula stood, visibly shaking. This is a witch hunt. She's grieving and confused. But no one was listening anymore, not even the board. The head of the planning commission cleared his throat. "We'll be launching a full investigation immediately. These documents, they're extremely troubling." Julia didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply stepped away from the microphone and returned to her seat, her shoulders squared, her face calm. The damage was done, not by vengeance, but by facts. And for the first time in a long while, she felt something close to peace. The courtroom buzzed for a moment after Daniel was taken away in cuffs, but the sound faded into a stunned silence as everyone began to process what had just unfolded. Veronica remained seated, her hands resting calmly in her lap, but her gaze was fixed, hard, unblinking, on the spot where her ex-husband had stood moments earlier. Her mind was quiet, but her heart was racing. Not from fear, not from anger, but from the undeniable realization that it was finally over. Her lawyer leaned in gently. "You want to make a statement to the judge?" Veronica nodded. She rose, slow and steady, stepping up to the podium. Her heels clicked against the wood floor, but she moved as if gliding, weightless, unburdened. When the judge gave her the go-ahead, she cleared her throat. "I'm not here to celebrate what just happened," she began, her voice clear but soft. "But I do want to speak, for myself and for my daughter." She let the silence hang for a beat. "Daniel was not always a monster, but the man he became made our lives smaller. He taught my daughter to doubt herself. He made me question my instincts. He took love and turned it into fear." Several people in the room, strangers even, nodded slowly. "And for years, I stayed quiet, thinking I could shield Emma by keeping the peace, But I was wrong. The peace wasn't real. It was silence, and silence only helped him. Veronica's green eyes shimmered, not from tears, but from something fiercer: truth. I speak now because I owe it to the woman I'm becoming, and to the girl my daughter still is. The judge gave her a long look, then simply said, "Thank you, Mrs. Clark." Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered, but Veronica declined all interviews. She didn't need headlines. The real victory wasn't for public display. Instead, she met Emma by the stone steps, where the young girl had been waiting with Aunt Carla. Emma ran to her. Emma ran. "You did it, Mom." Veronica crouched, pulled her daughter into her arms. "We did it, baby. You were so brave." The relief that washed over her was almost physical, like she could feel her bones realigning. Her spine straightened, not from defensiveness, but from freedom. That evening, she began the process of restoring what Daniel had nearly destroyed. She called the private tutor again, re-enrolling Emma into the art classes Daniel had once deemed a waste. She sat at the dining table and deleted every shared file, every login, every credit account he'd once had access to. She changed the locks. She threw out the last shirt he'd left behind. And when she opened the folder from her lawyer, the one that confirmed full custody and legal authority over Emma's health, education, and welfare, she didn't cry. She just smiled. Later that night, she found herself in Emma's room. Her daughter was asleep, arms wrapped around a sketchbook, her pencil still tucked behind her ear. Veronica pulled the blanket over her, kissed her forehead. She whispered, "We're okay now." Then she stood by the window, looking out into the street. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like something, or someone, was coming. The world was quiet, not because she was being silent, but because she was finally safe. The day after the final hearing, I woke up to a quiet house. No more emergency calls, no more legal letters, no more gaslighting texts from my brother. Just silence, and sunlight filtering through the kitchen window. I made coffee the way Mom used to, black, strong, and bitter. And for the first time in months, I didn't flinch at the memory. I smiled. Because now I knew, she wasn't crazy, she wasn't unstable, she was betrayed, and she fought to protect me, right until the end. A week later, I visited her grave, not with flowers this time, but with something better, the original copy of her will. The one that gave me guardianship of her legacy, not just her estate. I read it out loud, my voice steady despite the breeze. And I promised her I'd do better, with my daughter, with myself, with the truth. Healing didn't come all at once. It rarely does. There were nights I still heard my brother's voice in my head, mocking, smug, familiar. I'd find myself questioning my decisions, wondering if exposing him had made me vengeful. But then I'd see my daughter laughing freely, or I'd open a letter from one of Mom's old students saying how she changed their life. And I'd remember why I did it. Justice isn't revenge, it's clarity. And sometimes, clarity hurts like hell before it sets you free. I started therapy, not to fix what was broken, but to understand it. To stop carrying guilt that wasn't mine. To unlearn silence. I also began teaching part-time again, creative writing, mostly to older adults looking to finally tell their stories. It was fulfilling in a way I hadn't expected. I helped people name their pain, structure their chaos, and in some cases, write their own versions of closure. One afternoon, a woman in my class asked, "How do you know when a story's really over?" I looked at her and smiled. "You don't," I said. "But you know when you've said enough to walk away in peace." As for my brother, he disappeared from public view after the court ruled against him. The nonprofit board quietly removed him. His friends stopped returning his calls. I heard he tried moving to a different state to start fresh, but it's hard to outrun your own reflection when the internet keeps receipts. I didn't need to ruin him. He did that himself. Forgiveness? I'm not there yet. Maybe someday. But I'm no longer organizing my life around the wreckage he left. I'm building something beyond it. One morning, while organizing boxes in Mom's attic, I found a small envelope addressed to me in her handwriting. I opened it slowly. Inside was a photo of us. Me, her, and a 7-year-old me clutching a ribbon I'd won in a spelling bee. On the back, she'd written, "You are brave, even when they try to make you small. Don't forget who you come from." I framed it, not as a relic, but as a reminder. Because I remember now. I remember who I come from. I remember who I became. And I remember who I will protect, starting with myself. My family didn't fall apart. It was taken apart. And I put it back together, truth by truth, line by line. And maybe, just maybe, that's what healing really is.